It was the 60s, and I was around 10 years old, and we had moved into a very old homestead in a very small country town where everybody knew everybody. Nobody locked their doors or windows in those days, and as a matter of fact, some of the older homes didn't even have screens on the windows. It was a very, very hot summer, one of the hottest we'd ever had. So, of course, we slept with the windows open, the doors open, to grab any breeze that we could. We had a regular bedtime, us kids, around 8:30. But this particular night, for some reason, I felt very hesitant about going to bed, and I couldn't figure out why. I tried to stall with my parents as much as I could, until eventually my mother was so insistent that I get to bed because I had school the next morning. Feeling very, very uneasy, I climbed into bed, pulled the covers up, and just lay there because I just had a bad feeling. My bed was right under the window. After tossing and turning for quite some time and still feeling uneasy, I must have drifted off to sleep. But then I was jolted awake. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. As I know, I felt someone or something patting the top of my head. I was confused, shaken, scared, but I told myself that I was imagining it, and I tried to get back to sleep. Once again, it took me quite some time to drift off, until I felt that same feeling of someone patting me on the top of my head. I felt it. I know it was not my imagination. I was wide awake, and I was still laying there as I was just too afraid to move. I knew something was touching my head. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, but I knew I had to do something. I bolted out of my bed and straight into my parents' room. They woke up immediately, asking what was wrong. I told them what had happened, and as I suspected, they said I must have been dreaming. But they got up anyway and came into my room, checked everything out. Couldn't see anything. My dad even went and got his torch, shone it out the window, looked around, couldn't see anything, checked under the bed like they do with children who go complaining to them about something in the dark, and said once again, just hop back into bed, you've got school tomorrow, it was just a bad dream. I waited until my parents had gone back into their room, and I got out of bed and I went to the back and front door and I locked them both, and then I closed and locked my bedroom window. I still didn't get much sleep that night, but I managed to get up ready for school. My best friend lived just down the road and we always walked to school together. She arrived at my front gate and I noticed that she looked tired. I asked if she had a late night, and she stared at me with a frightened look on her face. My friend then told me that she had been awoken by someone touching the top of her head during the night. I was stunned. I grabbed her arm and I told her the same thing happened to me. We just looked at each other, not knowing what to say. We went back into my house, and after my friend told my parents what had happened to her, they at first asked if I had told my friend to say this, but seeing the look on our faces, they finally believed that something had happened. My dad called my friend's parents and they met up at our house to try and figure out what it could have been. Our fathers checked outside my window and were there for quite a while. Then they walked to my friend's house and did the same under her window. They came back and were silent and told us girls to go on to school, which we did, still not knowing what they had seen, because by the look on both their faces, we knew they had either seen something or knew something. Of course, my friend and I told our story to all our friends at school, and it was the talk of the schoolyard for that entire day. but no one else had reported anything like this happening to them. When I arrived home from school, I was surprised to see a police car in our driveway. The policeman asked me a few questions about everything that had happened, but there was nothing else I could tell him. There was a whispered conversation between my parents and the policeman before he drove off. Not saying another word, I headed to my bedroom. It wasn't spoken of again that night. Later on, when it was bedtime, for the first time since I could remember, my dad locked every window in the house and both the front and back doors. He also left the outside light on, but nothing further happened that night, nor for the next couple of months. All seemed back to normal, and the memory of that night started to slowly fade from my mind. Well, so I thought. We were having a real heat wave, and it was far too hot to sleep with the windows closed. I had no concerns about sleeping with the window open again, but I was wrong. I should have been concerned. Very concerned. Once again, I had that very uneasy feeling, and I did not want to get into my bed that night. But I just put it down to a flashback of memory of the last time something bad happened. I was startled awake by my hair being pulled hard. I tried to get up. I screamed for my parents and kept trying to get away, but my hair was being pulled harder and harder. I didn't care about the pain. I kicked my legs about trying to get out of bed, and I kept screaming. My parents finally came running in, and my mother started howling as my dad tried to get me off the bed. Eventually, I felt my hair being pulled out as my father lifted me off the bed into his arms. I was crying uncontrollably, as was my mother. They eventually settled me down somewhat, and to my surprise, instead of calling the police, we were in Dad's car and drove straight to my aunt's house, which was only a couple of blocks away. We stayed there for the next week, and I didn't go to school. I kept asking what was wrong, what had happened, what did they find? I never did get an answer. I asked if they had caught the person. Who was it? What were they trying to do? But still, no matter what I asked, I really didn't get any answers except to say, "Don't worry, you're safe now." We never went back to that house again. We moved to the next town over, and as time went on, the memories of that night started to fade, but never fully left. It was never spoken of until one day, when I was about 17, I sat my mum down and I begged her to tell me what it was that she saw. After some silence, she told me. When my parents ran into my room that night, they saw my hair being pulled and my head lifted at a very awkward angle. But what they didn't see, and what horrified them, was that there was nobody there. Nothing. No arm reaching through the window. No figure. Absolutely nothing. The last time this had happened to me, my parents had asked around town for any information, and the story they were told they did not believe. So not knowing what to do, they did nothing, and just hoped it was some stranger who had run off, never to come back. But that wasn't the case at all. The story they were told by the policeman and some of the older residents was that this was the ghost of a man who once lived there many, many years ago, who had tragically lost his daughter when she was about my age. He never got over her death, and the full circumstances were never known, but he always thought she was going to come back home. He died an old man in that house, waiting for her to return, but of course she never did. And as I was the first female child who had lived there, he had come to claim me, so it seems. It was also said that he would go to other houses where girls his daughter's age lived, and pat them on the head, as he did this to his own daughter every night when she went to sleep. Why had he decided to pull my hair and harm me that night? We didn't find that out. We couldn't find it out, as nobody knew. What would have happened if my parents had not woken to my screams as quick as they did? I did some of my own research and came across a short news article which told of the mysterious disappearance of a 10-year-old girl who was taken from her bed in the middle of the night. They never found out who did it, and they never found the little child. There was lots of talk and speculations among the townspeople, but the case was never solved. The house was eventually torn down, and to this day, no other house has been built on this land. I have children of my own now, and no matter what, I always make sure the windows and doors are locked up tight with the curtains drawn. I also never have my children's beds under the window. I do have a permanent reminder, though, of that night. Where my hair was pulled at the top of my head, there is a bald patch that never ever grew back.